This is the HE219. So this is the Scrub's guide to the HE219, and before I do anything else, I just want to lay out how exactly I'm going to do this. So first, I'm going to start off with explaining some characteristics with the plane, and then I'm going to go into how this plane performs in attacking air and attacking ground. So first, let me get into explaining some characteristics about this plane. Now, this plane will catch on fire a lot. This plane has 2 fuel tanks on the wings and 3 fuel tanks in the fuselage. Getting caught on fire is going to be a very common thing, and getting your engines destroyed is going to be very common because these engines are inline engines, so they're very, very susceptible to damage. Now, another thing I actually want to explain is, so you've got 2 pilots. Now, in front of those 2 pilots, there is a 12mm armor plate, and behind the second pilot, there are 2 8mm armor plates protecting the pilot in the back. So when you are going in a head-on, the first pilot will sometimes die, but the second pilot can take over and still fly the plane for you. And if you do decide to get on another head-on, that pilot will still be in the back seat magically flying the plane. So that pilot will very, very rarely die. If you want to fly this plane out and attack air, you're going to have a really tough time. This plane is not very good for attacking air. It's just not maneuverable, and if you do get it to that perfect maneuverable state, which is actually very good, but it is very hard to keep it in that state. Starting off, if you do decide to attack air, you're going to want to get into about a 10-degree climb, maybe a little higher. And then once you get into altitude, you want to make sure you're a bit higher than the bombers. This will take some time to figure out what altitude they're usually in. Very, very good against bombers. This plane is excellent against bombers. The armament on this plane is 2 30mm Mk103, 2 30mm Mk108s, and 2 20mm Mk151s. Now, the name of the gun doesn't really matter unless you're very into this game, but what that essentially means is this plane shoots a lot of lead downrange, and that lets you get a ton of damage down onto those planes. Specifically bombers or just about any fighter if you can land your shots. Getting shots on this plane to connect to anything is very dangerous. Whatever you hit will be severely damaged or it will go down. So if you want to get into dogfights, your best bet is to actually lead them into a head-on. The best way you're going to survive any dogfight is before the dogfight actually starts. A head-on is going to be your best friend. Head-ons will melt anything in this plane. Anything that you face will not have as much armament as you have. So this will typically lead to 2 things. The enemy will not know how dangerous you are, and you will get a very easy kill, and a very satisfying one at that. Or this other plane will try to avoid a head-on at all costs. This is basically because this plane has very bad maneuverability. Or not to say very bad. This is because this plane doesn't have maneuverability to keep up with the fighters. Now there's only one way that this plane can actually keep maneuverability with the fighters, and that is if it's at 550 kph. For those of you that use mph, it is 346. Now, you can outturn a lot of things at this speed, but it is very, very hard to keep this speed without losing so much altitude that you will risk crashing, or you could essentially just lose it all and you will lose the dogfight entirely. Now, if you want to get specific on to how this plane is when you're actually behind someone, the roll rate is mediocre on this plane, as so are the rudders. Sometimes the rudders can hinder you from actually hitting your targets. As for the ground attack, this is where the plane shines. You will get a lot of RP. I cannot stress it enough. You will get a lot of RP from just attacking tanks in this plane. It is very easy to attack tanks in this plane, but you are a very, very easy target for just about anyone. Any Spitfire, sometimes a Wyvern if you can't get them in the head-on, and 95% of the time if you do not get that head-on, you will lose that engagement. The Wyverns and the Spitfire are the most common enemies you'll fight. And still on the point of ground pounding, Sicily is your best friend. When you are ground pounding, you specifically want to go for columns of tanks, and you want to make sure you are behind them. If you are not behind them, you are not getting the most out of your ammunition, and you are working a lot harder to destroy those tanks. If you attack them from the front, the armor penetration will not make it all the way through from a distance, and you will have to get really close, dangerously close, to actually destroy those tanks. It is a much better decision to attack them from the rear and get more enemies in one strafing run. And one thing while you're ground pounding, it's often worth a try to actually ask your teammates if someone could fly above you so you could act as a bait. Being a bait in this plane actually is a good idea because usually someone who's RP hungry will go for you. They will completely ignore anyone who's just a little bit higher or just a little below you because you are a very easy target. You are not that maneuverable at a low altitude. So it's worth a shot to ask someone to actually cover you, or not so much cover you as to just fly over you, and if anyone dives in, they can pick up the kill very easily, having an altitude advantage. So all in all, I do think this plane is actually worth it if you have the money to spend and you want to grind the German tech tree. This plane is an amazing German grinder, and it is a lot of fun to play if you are not typically used to, or at least bored of this style of fighting, which is just ground pound and occasionally getting a kill and a head on. So that just about concludes the Scrub's Guide to the HE219. Thank you for watching.